Today we'll be building a flashlight app. Try to make this video quick because we have a lot to cover. Okay, so first thing we do, open up Xcode and you'll be greeted with this screen. You probably won't have anything over here. So we're going to click on create new Xcode project. We here select what type of project we want to create. If you're building for iOS, you click iOS and then app. I've never used any of these options. We click next. I'm going to call this project flashlight app. And so here's the important thing. You're going to have to click on interface storyboard. This is between UIKit and Swift UI. We'll be using storyboard, and our language is going to be Swift, not Objective-C. This stuff you don't have to have checked. Next we'll be deciding where we save it. So I have this folder called MA Tutorials, and you don't have to create a Git repository. We're going to create, great, and as you can see, we have a new project. Okay, so what is this? What is going on here? Let's start by talking about this left panel. You have multiple things that you can select here, but the most important one is like this folder icon, and this will show you your kind of like your file directory for your app. We have over here an app delegate. This controls what happens when we start our app and when we close our app and when we move to the background. Basically all the stuff that has to do with our app, like opening, closing. Scene delegate, kind of more confusing. We don't really have to worry about it too much, but it's kind of like it works with Windows. So if you were to build like if you were to build for the Mac, each window would have its own scene delegate. You can see here that there's like a window property. Okay, and then view controller. So this is a screen. So in a complex app, you're going to have many different view controllers. Each one is going to be a class. It's going to be, here's your class name, and here is what it extends. So this little symbol kind of signifies, in classes, this colon is used to signify what we are extending. So again, we are extending UI view controller. UI view controller is the main class that controls the screen. Kind of like in settings when you go between different screens, you can go into the general and then about and all those things. Like those are different view controllers. And so we're going to be creating one of those screens. We can rename this class whatever we want. Let's call it flashlight controller. Now that we've done this, we have to tell our app that this is going to be like, it's no longer view controller. So we're going to have to tell Xcode that when we open up our app, we have to send it, like this is our first screen. So the way we do that is by going up to the top here. This is where we control like the main, just a couple of like the main settings of our app and how it's going to work. Main interface is main. This is good. This is talking about this storyboard. Here we can lay out the different screens. So you can see here how there is a view controller. Now notice that if I go here, this panel is also very important. We're going to have to change the class of this controller. So right now it's talking about this. It has a class view controller, which we don't have defined. We have UI view controller defined, right? UI view controller is defined by Swift in UIKit. It comes for free, but view controller is a class that we just renamed. So we're going to have to rename it over here as well. So instead of view controller, we can click down this arrow. You can see all our options. We're going to pick flashlight controller. Also, we can start typing it in and it'll auto-complete it for us. So right now this is flashlight controller. That's going to be our first screen. Let's go ahead and change this background color to like, I don't know, green. Oh, by the way I did that is by I clicked on which view I want to change the background color of. Each screen comes with a view. A view is like a rectangle that holds content, and it can have subviews and subviews, and they can have subviews as well. And it's like a tree. So right now we have only one like rectangle that holds content. It's always going to be the size of that screen. And I just went into here, like the properties of that thing. After I clicked it, you can click it over here, or you can click it on the actual controller. Go to its properties, change the background to whatever color you want. Let's do system green. Now notice that at the top here, I have flashlight app and this iPod touch. So if I click play, it's going to run this app on a simulator, that an iPod touch 7th generation. So this is our launch screen. This is the screen that we see when all the content and all of the app is being loaded. Once it's done loading, it's going to transition into our controller, which is going to be a green screen. So let's wait for that to happen. Boom, perfect. So our green screen. Let's go ahead and stop it. Let's put some UI in here. So, I want to also mention that in Swift, just because a class is named something, that doesn't necessarily mean that the file of that class has to be named the class's name. So, but it's good convention to do that. So instead of view controller, let's go ahead and call this flashlight controller. Again, the name of the file doesn't indicate the name of our classes, but it's good convention. So we're going to keep it. We're going to keep that. Back in our main storyboard, you'll notice that we can play around with this a bit. Let's again change the background back to our default background color. Or sorry, it's going to be a system background color. Good. The default is actually a clear color. That's not what we want. We want the system background color, especially for the big view. Now, if I want to add more like elements or more views to this big view, I want to make them subviews, right? Like if you think of it as a tree, there's going to be a big view and it's going to have children, and those children can have other children, and so on and so on. So let's go ahead and try, for example, putting in another view. So if I click this plus button, or if I do Shift Command L, then I can go ahead and type in UI view, drag another one in here. Let's drag a couple. We can have them have different colors. So let's have this one system blue. This one is going to be system pink. And those UI views can have subviews. So let's put one inside of this blue, and let's make it a gray. Now notice that we still see it outside of the bounds, even though the blue view is like a rectangle that goes up to here, and the gray one is coming out of it, or gray one is like inside of it. It's not being cut off. To change this behavior, we can go to the parent view, and click on clips to bounds. And now you'll notice that it will clip all of its children to its bounds. So now let's run this again, and it seems to work, but there's something going on here. It seems like it's not fitting the screen, or it's not we're not seeing the same thing that we're seeing over here. So if I compare the two screens what I'm expecting versus what I'm seeing, you'll notice there are differences here. Okay, so the reason for that is because in Swift, by default, everything is laid out in terms of X and Y coordinates and width and height. Now, X seems to be okay, but Y, it seems like it's much higher up over here than it is over here. Why is that? Well, in Swift, or in most UI programming languages, y equals 0 and x equals 0 is at the top over here. And then as we go down, y is increasing. So, for example, here might be like y equals 500, y equals 1,000 over here. But as we go down, basically y increases. So if you'll notice, if I take this view, and if I go into like its size inspector, I can change its y coordinate. And if I move it, if I increase y, you'll see that it moves down. So let's go back and let's put it at like y equals 100. Yeah, and you'll see that it goes back up. So again, origin is over here. How do we fix this? How do we make it so that, for example, this is going to be laid out in the middle, right? Let's say I want it to be laid out in the middle regardless of which screen it's at. So for example, it should be in the middle for the iPhone 11, and it should also be in the middle for the iPod Touch 7th generation. So let's get rid of this. The way I can do that is by giving the view constraints. So what are constraints? Constraints are basically like rules that the view will always follow when being laid out by our system. So the way we can add constraints is by clicking on it. Over here are the constraint buttons. So let's say I want to add a width and a height constraint. I can click on this one, and we can click on width and height. And then regardless of which iPhone it's laid on, or which phone it's being displayed on, those will always be the width and the height of this view. Now you'll notice that it's red. That means that there is a problem here. Why is there a problem? Well, in general, you will need to give each view 4 constraints. One determining where it is located in terms of x and y, or sorry, one in terms of x, one in terms of y, and then a size and a height, or a width and a height. So one for x, one for y, one for the width, and one for the height. So we've given it the width and the height constraints, but we haven't given it the x and y constraints, so it doesn't know where it's going to be. So for x and y, let's tell it that the middle of this rectangle should always be in the middle of our screen. So the way we can do that is by going over here. Oh, no, sorry, over here, and clicking on constrain horizontally in our container, and also vertically, because we want it to be in the vertical center as well. If I click on that, you'll notice that it's going to be in the middle of its parent. So its parent is going to be this view, our main view. Each view controller comes with one main view, remember? And it's going to be in the middle of that view. Perfect. If we run it now, you'll notice that it will be in the middle of our iPhone, or our iPod Touch 7th generation. There you go. So good, we're making progress. Let's add a button on here. So if I click on Shift Command L and I click on button, put that button here. Now remember, just because the button is in the middle over here doesn't mean that the button is going to be in the middle when we run our app. So let's go ahead and add a width, a height, and a horizontal center and a vertical center again. Now the button is in the middle. Let's say I don't want the button to be in the middle anymore. Let's say I want it to be constrained to the left side of the screen. So get rid of this center constraint. And instead of constraining it to the middle, we're going to go over here. We're going to click on this value. Notice that this kind of looks like a view. It's supposed to be like a view. And this is the distance from the next like left edge of something. So let's make it like, for example, 32. You'll notice that now we have a constraint from this left edge to this left edge equaling 32. If I click on it, the constant or the value of that constraint is 32. Okay. Let's go ahead and add our buttons. So we're going to need 2 buttons. One for the screen light and one for the flashlight. So if I go over here and let's I've actually created images for both the flashlight and the screen light. We're going to use them in this tutorial. So I'm going to just go ahead and drag this resources folder. And it has an icons folder and a flashlight, and you'll see here a bunch of different icons. The ones that we're concerned with are flashlight off two times, and flashlight off 3 times. And the same thing for both flashlight on, screen light off, and screen light on. Now notice that there's an SVG file here. We can't use those, but those are vector graphics. You don't have to worry about this. We're not going to be able to use them in our app. And this is like the Adobe Illustrator file that I used to create it. So again, these are the most important files that we need here. We can go ahead and drag them into our assets folder. Assets are where we keep all of our images, all of our colors, basically all the stuff that is not code and is not like UI related. So we go ahead and we can drag that in there, and boom. So you see here how I have flashlight off, flashlight on, screen light off, and screen light on. Now I have to select all of these because I don't want them to be black when we run the app. These are just like templates. In reality, I want to give it like different colors. So if I select all of them, I go into the attributes inspector. I can render as template image. So template image will allow me to change their colors later on. So let's go back into our main storyboard, and we click this button again in this attributes inspector, give it an image. So first of all, right now the button has some text. Let's get rid of that text. This is the text field, or like the title field. So let's go ahead and boom. Now the button doesn't have anything in there. And our image, we can go ahead and select which image we want to give it. So let's make this one the flashlight off button. And then let's also give it some sort of background color. Let's give it a nice system fill background color. This will adapt to dark mode as well, so that we get that for free. Now I'm going to pick a size that I think is fine for a button. I'm going to add this aspect ratio constraint, and that's going to allow me to change so instead of adding both the width and the height, I can add like one of them, select the aspect ratio and set the aspect ratio to 1, right? Because if I set the aspect ratio to 1, then the width equals the height. So let's set the height equal to 100. Again, it's red because we've only given it a width and a height. Now also notice that the aspect ratio right now is not 1. So the multiplier is 6 to 5. Let's set it to 1. And let's real quick just see how it would look. So horizontal, vertically. So boom in the middle. Okay, this looks like a nice, like a nicely sized button. Okay, so very important. We're gonna have to change the style of the button to default. And then over here, now it will change the button size as we change the frame of the button. It still has text, so let's get rid of that. Notice how now it's orange. What does that mean? It means that what is being shown right now is not what's going to be actually laid out in the app. To fix that, we can just click on this arrow. It's going to return it back to how it will look. Let's go ahead and kind of move it up a bit. So we're going to have to do this. Let's move it up maybe negative 64. And this one, same thing as we did earlier. We're going to have to set the type to custom, the style to default, get rid of the text. Default image, we're going to put the screen light off button, screen light off. Our background we can set to system fill. And that's going to be a nice button. Now let's go ahead and set the height and the aspect ratio similar to the first button. And we're going to again do center vertically and center horizontally. And let's move this one down 64. So 64 down. There we go. And we have our buttons. Now let's say that I wanted to make the image a little bit smaller but keep the size of the button. So the way I can do that is by changing the content insets or the image insets. Let's do that one. Let's do an inset of 6 on every side. Let's do 10 maybe a little bit better. So let's also do that for this one. Good. And we have our buttons. Perfect. So let's go ahead and run our app again. You'll notice that we get a nice little thing here. So nice buttons. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and now connect them. I want to design them a little bit more in code. So I'm gonna I have it hooked up so that when I click on option and a file, it opens up in a new window. So I'm gonna open up this like storyboard in a new window. The way you can choose that is by going into Xcode, Preferences, Navigation. So optional navigation is use a separate window for me. So that's how I get that. When I click option and I click on a file, it will open up on a separate window. Now, let's hook these up to our code. So these buttons, all I have to do to hook it up to my code is click on it, control and drag into my code. Now I get to name my button variable. So I'm going to name this one, or did we just drag? We just dragged the flashlight button. So flashlight button, perfect. Let's do the next one. I'm going to call this one our screen light button. And let's make them look good. So right now they don't look too good. They are kind of squarish in the app. Let's make them circles. So if I do flashlight button dot layer dot corner radius, then I can set that equal to well, our height is 100, so the corner radius would have to be 50. Now screen light button dot layer dot corner radius, I can also set to 50. And if I click on run, then boom, we get circles. Beautiful, beautiful. Next, let us do some toggling. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook this up. So as you saw there, when I hooked it up to the top of the view controller, right, I was creating an outlet connection. Now there are three different types of connections that we can create. We can create an outlet, an action, and an outlet collection. This is not going to be used a lot, but these ones are, especially for buttons. So that was an outlet. An outlet is basically a variable. We're creating a variable. Now let us create an action. So if I go back here, and we always define our variables at the top. That's just good coding practice. Drag it into like the coding area. Notice that it automatically knows that this is going to be an action because we didn't drag it at the top. We kind of told it that we want it to be like, it's like it already assumes that we would not want to define a variable down here. So it already assumes that it's an action. If it doesn't, always you can change it. Name, this is what the name of the function is going to be. So let's name it like did tap flashlight button. That's kind of how we name things in Swift. It's like, what did you do? And then what did you do it to? Type, and then any. This is fine. We want this to be triggered when we touch up inside the button. So that means that if I touch inside the button and then I release inside the button as well. And then we can go ahead and click connect. That will create a nice function. Let's do the same for the second one. Did tap connect. Now, if I click on print, and then I can, so print is basically the Swift equivalent of system.out.println. Now, yeah, so obviously much better looking. If we print hello, or let's say flashlight tapped, and then we can also do print screen light tapped. If I click on the run, then now when I tap on these buttons, or when I touch up inside of these buttons, you'll notice that I get these messages in our console. So you're looking down here, you'll see that these messages appear in our console. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics of the layout, let's talk about the functionality. Here's how I want this to work. We're going to first work with the screen light button, and when we first start the app, the screen should be black. The screen should be black because the screen light is off. We will record whatever the current screen brightness is, and we'll save it to a variable. And then when we turn on the screen light, we'll set the background color to white, so the screen will be white, and we'll set the brightness to max. And then if they turn it back off, then we'll return their brightness to whatever it is that it was originally. So let's talk about this. So right now, this is the view controller, right? This is the view controller class. It controls a view. The view that it controls is like the main view, the main screen view. If we want to make the screen black, we could click on that main view and set the background color to black. but I'm going to go ahead and do it through code so you can see what that looks like. This is again our flight controller, so it controls our view. Notice that we have this viewDidLoad method. This viewDidLoad method gets called when we basically load that view, just like it says over here. If you we're overriding this function, so it's like we extended view controller. This UI view controller has a method called viewDidLoad, and we're overriding it. We're adding functionality. And so you can see here when we call super.viewDidLoad, this method is called, you can read this information if you click on this question mark. This is the documentation behind this method. Notice that it says you usually override this method to perform additional initialization on views that were loaded from your files. Basically, all that means is we're going to do some additional setup before we present the screen to the user. So here's where we did our setup for making the corners round. We can do additional setup by setting the view background color to black. So we're going to say view. So this is or it doesn't matter. You can do self.view or just view. But the point is that we're accessing the view controller's view. So the view controller controls the view, and we're accessing that view. View.background color is equal to UIColor.black. So boom, and now if we run our app, you'll notice that we'll have a black background. So as you can see here, our background is black. I want to say that so Swift is a pretty smart language, so we can say view.background color is UIColor.black. That's how we would normally kind of do it in Java. But Swift already knows that it's expecting a UI color. See, if we look at this variable view.background color, if we click on it, it knows that it's a UI color. So actually, we don't even need this UI color. This will work just as fine, and it's usually how developers do things in Swift. Now that we have the background color, let's go ahead and create a new variable that stores whatever it is that the screen brightness is at the beginning of our when we launch our app. So we're going to say var default screen brightness. Let's do that. And we're going to set that equal to 0.0. So by default, when we create variables in Swift, it knows the value of that variable it knows the type of that variable based on the value that you provide. So we provided a double as a value, and you'll see here that default screen brightness has this double as its current value. I'll show you how to change the value of this variable. So let's say that instead of a double, we wanted to make it a float. So if we want to specifically specify what the type is, you do a colon and then we put in whatever type we want. So float, or in our case, CG float, which is used by the core graphics framework. When we do, now that we have this default screen brightness, we're going to have to set it to some value. So when we open our app, let's set it to the current screen brightness. If I go default screen brightness is equal to UI screen.main.brightness, that will set the default screen brightness to UI screen.main.brightness, so the current brightness. This is a value from 0 to 1. So 1 is the maximum brightness and 0 is the lowest brightness possible. Okay, now let's talk about this method. So we're going to do some code when we tap the screen light button. First of all, we're looking back over here, the screen light button should actually be the other image. So it should already be the screen light on image, because when we start our app, we will want to press this button in order to turn our screen light on. We just did it in the storyboard, but let's say that we don't want to do it through the storyboard and we want to do it through code. So we're going to go here and we're going to say screen light button dot set image, and then now we provided an image. So the image that we want to provide it is this screen light on image, right? And it's expecting a UI image. You can see the type over here, UI image. This question mark is a thing we'll get to later. Very important, but we'll get to it later. So I'm going to start by saying UI image. And then to create a new image, I can do .init. This is kind of like saying the new in Java. So if I do new UI image, right? In Swift, it's instead of the new keyword, we use the init keyword. And here we can give it some sort of initializer. So the initializer that we're looking for is the named initializer right over here. Also in Swift, you don't actually need the init. So if you did this without doing .init, it will know that you're initializing this type. So UI image, and then we can initialize it this way. So, and this is actually the way that most developers do it. Named, and here we're going to put in a string. Our string is going to be this string right over here. So right over here. And then for UI controls.state.normal, or again, like I said, it already knows that it's expecting a UI control.state, so we can do a .normal over there. Now, if you notice, there's like this little for label here. In Swift, the methods usually have labels that tell you what each parameter is. You may need some time to get used to it, but you'll learn to love it and then you'll question yourself, why aren't other programming languages doing it? But this is something special to Swift, and that's great. Now, this is the normal image. So the screen light on is the normal. Now, screen light button.set image, and we're going to actually do another one. UI image. Whoops, UI image named. So notice here how there's also like the named parameter in the initializer, similar to how there's like this for label over here. So yeah, again in Swift there's like these labels normally when you provide parameters to functions. UI image named, and then we provide a value. So let's go ahead and provide the screen light off over here. And for this state, it's going to be .selected. So what's going to happen is when we are in the normal state, we're going to have the screen light on image. And our normal state is going to be when the screen brightness, or then when the screen light is off. So when we use our app, when the screen light is off, that's going to be our normal state of the button. And that's going to show you the screen light on image. So because the screen light is off, it'll show this image to show you that you can press the button in order to turn the screen light on. Now over here, when we are in the selected mode, so when we select that button, we will turn the screen light, we will change the image to the screen light off image. So it'll show the screen light off, indicating that you can press this button now to turn the screen light off. So that's how that works. And over here, let's do screen light button dot is selected is equal to not screen light button dot is selected. And that'll basically toggle our selected state for that button. So you'll notice how now we get to toggle between those two images. Now, if the screen light button dot is selected, so if we're currently now let's create an if statement that takes care of when the screen light button is selected. So when it's selected, that means that the screen light is on. So we're going to do some code over here. If the screen light is on, like now that the button is selected, the screen light is on. So we're going to do UI screen.main.brightness is equal to 1. Before we do this, we're going to have to store the current brightness. So default screen brightness is equal to UI screen.main.brightness. And then we're going to set the background color to white. So view.background color is equal to .white. Kind of like the opposite over here, we're going to do UI screen.main.brightness is equal to default screen brightness, and then view.background color is equal to .black. Let's see if that works. Beautiful. So our app works perfectly for the screen light. Now let's take care of this flashlight. Okay, so similar to how we did the screen light button over here, we're going to do the flashlight button. So we're going to do flashlight button.set image, and then we're going to create a UI image named, and then flashlight on for .normal. Similar here, flashlight button.set image, UI image named flashlight off for .selected. And again, we can do flashlight button.is selected is equal to not flashlight button.is selected. Let's see if that works. So you can see here how we can change the flashlight to turn it on or off. Okay, so how are we actually going to turn on the flash on our phone? And for this, I'm going to need the help of Stack Overflow because I don't know this off the top of my head. So yeah, let's get started. First of all, we're going to have to use the import AV foundation framework. So go ahead and import AV foundation. And then we're going to do let device equal AV capture device dot default for, and then here where it's expecting a media type, and we can do AV media type dot video, or again just dot video works perfectly fine. Now notice that this returns a AV capture device with a question mark at the end. The question mark actually signifies that this value can be nil, and nil in Swift is the same thing as null in Java. It's kind of like an undefined value. And so the question mark kind of tells us, wait a second, this actually might not return a known value. It might actually be nil. So how do we get around that? Well, we can go ahead and do if device doesn't equal nil, and then put in some code. And that is valid. That's a valid way of doing it. But in Swift, this type of pattern where you're checking where something doesn't equal nil is so common that Apple decided to create a shortcut, and we can actually just put this in here. And what happens is now when we use device in here, you'll notice that it's no longer a question. There's no question mark at the end. So now it's a defined value. If I click on this device again, you'll notice that there's no question mark, and it's now never going to be nil. Like this will only get run. This if statement will only get run if this device is a valid device. And so here we can put in some code and not have to worry about whether the device is nil or not. Now, also, we have to make sure that the device actually can turn on the flashlight. In older generations of iPhones or iPads, there was no flash. So we're going to have to make sure that the device can actually turn on the flashlight. And the way we do that is by adding to the if statement. We can do and device dot has torch. Now, this is how you would expect to write this, but you'll see that this gives us an error. Why? Because this is not a normal if statement. You'll notice that we're also defining this variable in this if statement. So instead of using and, we're going to have to use another one, or a special one that's like a comma instead. And this is kind of like the and for when you have if lets at the beginning. So if I build this again, which is through Command B, you'll notice that now it's happy. So if the device, if there's a valid device and the device has a torch, we're going to do a try-catch block. And this is unfortunate that we're going to have to get into try-catch blocks in this first tutorial, but it's the only possible way of doing this correctly. So we're going to do. So instead of a try-catch in Swift, it's actually called a do. And if there's a catch, then there's also going to be this variable named error. So catch, and we can print whatever error it gives us. So we're going to do try device dot lock for configuration, and you'll notice that this throws, and that's why we have to put this in a try and catch block. Afterwards, we're going to have to do device dot unlock for configuration. This one doesn't have a it doesn't throw an error. We don't have to worry about it throwing an error, so we don't have to put a try next to it. Now, I don't honestly know why we need this, but there is, you can read the documentation of why we need to lock the device for configuration. I just looked on the Stack Overflow and noticed that everybody was doing it, so that's why I'm doing it. Here we're going to do device.torch mode is equal to, and then we're going to do, we can do .on, .auto, or .off. So here's where we have to decide whether we turn the flash on, off, on or off. So basically we turn it on if the flashlight button is selected. So we can do if flashlight button is selected, meaning that the flashlight is on, we're going to do device.torch mode equals on. Else we're going to do device.torch mode equals off. So, if you've ever used the tertiary operator, or I don't know what it's called, but the question mark and this might look like an ugly thing. So we can make it look better. We can do device.torch mode equals, and then flashlight button dot is selected. And then if it's selected, we're going to do on. Otherwise, we're going to do off. And that's basically, this line is basically this entire chunk of code. So we can delete that. All right, and with that said, I feel like we're pretty much good to go. If you want to play around with it, there's device.torch level, and you'll notice that we can provide some sort of level to this brightness. So you'll see that there's a value from 0 to 1, and you can, try to change it a bit, maybe add a slider that can set the level of the torch or the level of the flash. That'd be pretty cool. But for the most part, this is pretty good to go. So let's just run it one more time. And here we go. Now I'm running this on a simulator, so obviously we can't see the flash. But you'll have to trust me that it works. One more thing before we finish. I don't like this corner radius is equal to 50 statement over here. Because let's say now that let's say I go back and I try to change this, like, the dimensions of this, like instead of setting it to 100, let's say I want it to be at 80, and this one too. If I run the app again, you'll notice that it's not a circle. It's a very ugly shape. So instead of hard coding the value 50, we're going to do flashlight button dot bounds dot height divided by 2. And for here, we're going to do screen line buttons dot bounds dot height divided by 2. And this bounds is automatically like it contains like the internal coordinate system of whatever view we're talking about. So you can read about it here, but the bounds is basically a rectangle with the origin at 0, 0 for the most part, almost all the time. You can change it, but no one actually ever does. The bounds origin is always 0, 0, and the size is going to be, we can do .size .height, or we can just get the height, but it has a height and a width, and we're just going to take the height and divide it by 2. So again, let's run this, and you'll see that it looks better. All right. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I'll provide all of the files and the assets that you need for this project, either in the description or wherever we upload this video. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.